And welcome back again. Yours truly, Anthony Parker, Alexander of Midnight at the Oasis. And this is produced by Parker Media Productions, Parker Social Media, and also keeping it honest with yours truly, Anthony Parker. We thank you for attending the show. Tell your friends, hit the like button, look down there, hit the share button. See it going? Whoa, there it goes. All right. And of course, subscribe. You have any questions or comments, you can email yours truly. It's parkerman2011 at gmail.com. Parkerman2011 at gmail.com. You can text me. Telephone number is 216 702 3718. 216 702 3718. Got a lot of interesting stuff on our show. You know, we try to do the left side, we try to do the right side. At the end of the shows, we hope you decide. But no matter what, it's the truth that we're giving you. You have any questions? You know how to reach me. So, Midnight at the Oasis, excuse me, we come on every night at this time. We give you the news of the day, what you had, and the news for tomorrow. So, it might be some news that you might have heard, but then it might have been something that you might miss. But even if it's news that you heard, we put it with a Parker twist, and that's what we're doing today. So, we haven't had a chance to talk about this yet. We've been talking about Tim Weiss's military background. Very controversial. We've done it a lot. We've only done it because a lot of people weren't talking about it. Now they are. So we haven't talked about J.D. Vance's. We're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to piggyback off of Megan Kelly, and we're going to get a little more in-depth background on J.D. Vance's. We're also going to talk about the new polls that are out. Democrats, Republicans, who is winning? Donald Trump, don't get too cocky. Kamala said she's the underdog. Well, this underdog is starting to move up. What's the difference between Donald Trump in the last election and this one? He seems more reserved to a point, but yet he's still calling out names. Call out the positions. Whether they're good or bad, you call them out, and then, us, the voters, we have to check it out. But ever since he got shot, he picked his running mate. He had the convention. He went up as high, and was this as high as he could go? Because as soon as he got that, and that's pretty high. You got shot, literally killed. And then you did your running mate, picked your running mate, and then did your convention. And then in that time, Joe Biden bowed out. They were trying to see who was going to be the person to take their place. It turned out to be Kamala. She picked her VP. They're on tour, pretty much. And the convention is coming up. So now they're in a groundswell. But the one thing that is trying to stop the Democrats is Tim Weiss's record as far as military service. And we're going to finish that section up and then go a little bit to J.D. Vance's. And Bernie Sanders, when Donald Trump says that Kamala is more progressive than Bernie Sanders, well, who better to hear talk about Bernie Sanders than Bernie Sanders himself? We've got a clip with him on Anderson Cooper. We're going to talk about that as it's airing. But he is going to talk about why people are talking to him. I'm not a Bernie Sanders fan. I used to be. But when I found how he was throwing Cornel West under the bus, and they're supposed to be good friends, I didn't particularly like that. And when I had Cornel West, Dr. West, who's running third-party candidate for president, you have to check out some of my clips. I told Cornel West, how do you feel? Because Cornel West never really gave his feelings before. But I asked Cornel West, Dr. West, how do you feel about your bro, your buddy, not standing by you when you were running or while you're running for president? Are you just a bit saddened by that? So on my show, he was able to admit he was a little sad. And go on my shows. I have short versions, as short as 5 seconds. I've got long versions, half hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, 3 hours. I put a lot of work into it. And you can see some of the shows that I'm talking about that maybe other streaming shows are not, or other mainstream media shows are not. We just do things in a Parker twist. And as far as supporting us, we have this Patreon page. You type in Patreon, you go on the site, type in Keeping It Honest, yours truly, Anthony Parker, and there's 3 tiers. And on these tiers, these are fundraising tiers. They're kind of like PBS. You get on there and you can contribute on any tier that you want to keep us going. We thank you for supporting us since we've been on. Subscribe, subscribe, subscribe. I love that you guys, again, I always say this, you guys talk to me on my threads through the comments. People are commenting, and they are really commenting. And I like that we have a community of commenters, and I would like to eventually have some of these community commenters on my show. Speaking of comments, we're going to read about some of the comments that we've had dealing with some of the shows and clips that we've shown. So I'm going to read this to you. This new survey, Kamala Harris is ahead or tied with Donald Trump in 6 of 7 battleground states. So out of the 7 battleground states, the big ones, she's tied or ahead now of Donald Trump. So how would that compare when Biden was around? So this survey was brought to you by the Cook Political Report, and it surveyed the 7 key states which I listed: Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, North Carolina, Arizona, and she's tied with Trump in Georgia. So Nevada is the only state that Trump is winning. So if any of those states are you guys, and you're a Trump supporter, oh my God. And if any of those states you're a Kamala supporter, maybe yay. Wow. So Harris leads in 3 states: Arizona, Michigan, and South Carolina. And that's interesting because how much of those did Joe Biden win? So there's 270. That's the big number that you need to win the electoral election. You need 270. So Biden was struggling in the Sun Belt states of Arizona. This is what he was struggling in: Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, and North Carolina. And they say that could have been one of the reasons why they wanted him to drop out. So Trump led Biden. Out of the 7 states, he led him in 6. Wow. This was conducted in May. But Harris is now largely caught up, and she's making it a big race. So this is interesting. With 91% of the voters who backed Biden in 2020, they now say that they will back Harris. 91%. So he hasn't really lost anything. Okay, or maybe he was losing, but now that Harris has taken Biden's place, she supposedly would get 91% of those votes. Wow. So Harris leads Trump head to head among, now this is interesting, the demographics. So she leads Trump. Independent voters across the 7 battleground states, she leads Trump 48% to 40%. So independents are really gathering around Harris by 8%. Now, when Biden was out and he was going against Trump. Trump was leading 41% to 38%, only 3% among independents. And now she flipped it and she's beating him 8%. And perhaps more important, Harris leads double hater voters. So, how many people have heard of that term, double hater voters? Those who say they don't like Biden or Trump. Makes sense? Double hater. She leads them by a wide 30 percentage points, 54% to 24%. Trump had previously led this group. And so it's interesting to see how this is going to turn. So, in many ways, Harris is, here we go, unburdened by what has been. Let me know where you heard that from. Unburdened by what has been. That is kind of like making sense. So it's almost like she's saying, whatever happened, I don't care. So unburdened by what has been. Let's get that on t-shirts. Now we know, let's make it make sense. Unburdened by what has been. We've heard her say that a couple times. We kind of laugh and say, what does she mean? She technically now is unburdened by what has been. So forget what she said or other policies. She doesn't care about that. She doesn't care about anything about the past. She's even recreating stuff and maybe falsifying what she never said or what she said, because she has been unburdened by what has been. She's a sitting incumbent. And a lot of people are like, well, if she's connected with Biden, maybe they won't vote for her. Yet 56% of battleground state voters say she represents a chance to turn the page of the Trump-Biden era. And they see her as representing a new generation of leadership. Duh. Because she's literally 20, 25 years younger than them. So why wouldn't she be the leader of new leadership, of a new generation? So Trump has tried to slow her momentum down, saying that she's dangerously liberal and she's trying to maybe distance herself from Biden when she has always been with Biden. So it's up to the American people. And her approval rating has now gone up from 40% much of her term to even higher. So, she's got Tim Walz on there, and she's calling herself the underdog. And I guess she's going with that. But if this goes like it is, she's not the underdog. She's come back with a vengeance, a Democratic Republic. And what we're going to do, not right now though, we're going to go through those 7 states. Don't worry, it won't be boring. And give you the percentage points of how this election could technically turn out to be. That seemed like John King on CNN. So you're watching Midnight at the Oasis. What do you think so far? Do you think now that Donald Trump should say, hey, I better get back to what worked for me? Because now this isn't working. I can't use a shooting assassination attempt. I can't use a convention attempt. I have to use what I've done before and what she is trying to do, and how she's been wishy-washy, and how Tim Walz has changed his military background, and also how you had Joe Biden in the White House for years, but yet you said he was fit to be president. And he says, with about a week of him dropping out, I'm not dropping out, but he dropped out. So now we're going to talk about J.D. Vance a little bit. And we haven't really talked about him in a while, too much. So we're piggybacking off the Megyn Kelly show as she gives some information on J.D. Vance, stuff that I didn't know, stuff probably you didn't know, but then they're going to end it again with Tim Walz because he's so controversial. He's been out there on the campaign. They're trying to, erase what he had put and what people had put on his military background. And if the media doesn't attack this part, then they're really not the media. But as we found out with Joe Biden, if the media wants to put something out there, they will. whether it's true or not. And sometimes the media just doesn't care because it's popular with Americans. So, like I said, use all these shows, these clips as footnotes, and then go, well, not footnotes, clip notes, sorry, and then go check it out for yourself. But let's listen in, and look. And how many knew this about JD Vance?
Brianna Keilar, who is terrible. She's at CNN. She's another partisan hack who should have been eliminated during the Brian Stelter, Don Lemon cleanup that they did. But she managed to hold on. And she decides the real story here is JD Vance's military service. Listen.
I also think that JD Vance as a messenger on this may be an imperfect messenger, because we have, as you introduced him, as a combat correspondent, which was what his title was. But when you dig a little deeper into that, he was a public affairs specialist, someone who did not see combat, which certainly the title combat correspondent kind of gives you a different impression.
And I didn't know that he was a combat correspondent. I just heard that he was in the military, because he's never really elaborated on that. So they're trying to compare Walsh's military experience, and he wasn't combat, in the combat, to JD Vance's, who was a correspondent, who technically wasn't in the war either, but they've given JD Vance so much gratis because he's been in the military that nobody really asked, from what I saw, what was your position? What did you do? So as they're questioning Waltz, now they're trying to bring JD Vance in there. And when you serve in the military, does it matter what you serve in as long as you serve? Or do you have to be in a certain position for people to give you the acclaim that you deserve? But then if you're in the military, you should get that acclaim anyway.
So he may be the imperfect messenger on that.
Dental insurance from Physicians Mutual Insurance Company helps cover preventive care, basic work, and...
Okay. She admits in the clip, that was his title. That's why he was introduced that way, because that was his actual title.
So whether you're a correspondent, what is your actual title that you're being introduced as? And is it a legitimate actual title? So that's JD Vance's actual title.
But she doesn't like his responsibilities over there. Mm-hmm. So she would like to compare him unfavorably, Emily, to Tim Walz, who refused to go to Iraq. JD Vance fired back at Brianna Keilar saying, come on. When asked to go to Iraq, I went. And he served his country honorably. No, he wasn't in service for 24 years like Tim Walz, but he also was in service as a Marine for 4 full-time years. For 4 years full-time as a Marine.
So 4 years full-time to 24 years. Doesn't matter the length of service as long as you're committed.
And served overseas in Iraq during a dangerous time. The nerve of this woman to try to diminish him because she doesn't like the actual responsibilities he had while there.
And I think it's something you only do if you're trying to rationalize your own partisan favor for the other person, because you can't handle that there may be an imbalance on this particular issue, that maybe JD Vance has more credibility on this issue. So in order to rationalize you feeling wrong about that, right? Like, it can't be right that JD Vance has more credibility on this. Let's not give him anything. We don't want to give him any credit. So you know what? Yeah, it's his title, but it's over. It's like, it's his freaking title. It's the actual title. Meanwhile, Tim Walz is using the wrong title and doing the overrepresentation, which again, at best, the best spin you can put on it is that he's complicit. He's allowing other people to say it. He's allowing his campaign to write it. So again, it's at best he's complicit, but at worst, he's actually actively participating in it. And we know for a fact the title is attributed incorrectly. So that's actually JD Vance's title. I mean, give me a break. You're going to split hairs when it comes to JD Vance, but you're not even going to split those hairs when it comes to Tim Walz, or you're going to choose to split the JD Vance hairs in this case instead of focusing immensely or more on the Tim Walz ones at all. I mean, that's a great representation of where their mindset is actually.
So that is interesting. So JD Vance has his title. Everybody knows his title. But with Tim Waltz, he could have corrected it over the years, but never did.
Actually.
Not to mention, as a member of the press, you'd think she'd have some respect for the dangers that even embedded reporters sent to Iraq faced in trying to bring the story back to Americans. Never mind somebody who's actually a Marine. So F you, Brianna Keelar. You're not a supporter of the troops. She's always trying to claim like she's married to a military guy. And like when she actually starts talking about them, it's always like this. Go ahead, Eliana.
I think it's worse than what both of you are saying. I think her remark was an intentional obfuscation of the issue here, in that nobody has accused J.D. Vance of misrepresenting what his position was or what his duties were when he went abroad. He writes about them in his book, that he was a press correspondent and he helped the Marines field media inquiries in Iraq.
And I think that's interesting. I didn't know that about J.D. Vance. He was there in a media capacity, but he was in a war zone. Because all I've heard was that, he served in the military. So that was, and even as a reporter, you're in positions that are pretty dangerous because you have to tell the stories of some of the other military people who are putting their lives on the line. And you as a reporter, for you to adequately do that, you have to put yourself on the line to tell the stories about them putting themselves on the line. And out of anybody, I admire any military reporter that has to get down in the dirt with the other military people and tell the stories to the American people so we can see exactly what we're fighting for. So I give JD a lot of credit for
that. She says he may not be the best messenger, apparently because he didn't see combat. That's the implication. But the accusation against Tim Walz isn't that he didn't see combat. It's that he misrepresented his responsibilities and his duties. Nobody's trying to diminish his record of service to this country. The criticisms are that he has not been honest about it.
And he did do 24 years, which is a long time. So we give him credit for doing that long amount of years for the military.
And didn't go to combat. And didn't go to combat when he knew it was coming his way. I mean, we had on Tom Behrens, the guy who went and fulfilled this role instead as Command Sergeant Major. He was on the day after this story broke last week. And he was saying he left his guys in the lurch. He was like, you have to understand, in the military, this kind of thing is unthinkable. Like, he helped train them. He was the highest non-commissioned officer. He trained these guys. They're getting ready for war. And then when war came, when it was time to actually go do the thing that they'd been training for, he cut and ran. That's why he saw it as such a betrayal of the guys. You know, it is about more than just the whatever stolen valor, if you want to call it that, but the using a rank that doesn't belong to you. He knew they were going, and he chose not to.
And that's what some of the military that served with Tim Walz said, that when it was time to go to war or even get deployed to a war zone, and he was one of the commanders, he decided not to do it and decided to get into politics. So there are people outside, voters who may say, wow, he's a war guy. I mean, he's a military guy. But the people that served with him said he's a traitor. So that's interesting when the people who you served with don't believe that you had the best interest of them at heart, but was only looking at yourself and an opportunity to move forward.
Let them go with someone else. And men in his unit died, men that he was responsible for. So I really don't want to hear it, because you're right. J.D. Vance has never misstated what he actually did. She may not like his title. That's the title. Too bad if you don't like it. It's just so gross. Here's one other guy, by the way. This is John Kolb, Lieutenant Colonel. He's the man actually who would take over Waltz's unit.
And I want you to listen to this, what she's saying, very carefully.
I don't know how his responsibilities dovetailed with Behrens, because I know he also took over some of them. But he had a post that's been making the rounds on Facebook, and it reads in part as follows. I do not regret that Tim Walz retired early from the Minnesota Army National Guard, did not complete the Sergeant's Major Academy, broke his enlistment contract, or did not successfully complete any assignment as a Sergeant Major. Unwittingly, he got out of the way for better leadership. Tom Behrens was the right leader at the right time. He sacrificed to answer the call, leaving his family, business, and farming brother to train, lead, and care for the soldiers. Like a great leader, he ran toward and not away from the guns. By all accounts, he was a competent, this is back to Walls. He was a competent chief of firing, battery, gunnery sergeant, and first sergeant. I cannot say the same of his service sitting frocked in the command sergeant major chair. He did not earn the rank or successfully complete any assignment as an E9. It is an affront to the non-commissioned officer corps that he continues to glom onto the title. I can sit in the cockpit of an airplane, doesn't make me a pilot. Similarly, when the demands of service and leadership at the highest level got real, he chose another path.
Wow. So I guess he's not a fan of Tim Walz. You just said it, okay? What he was a fan of was the guy that replaced him and became the leader they were looking for. Wow.
I'll tell you guys, I don't know where this lands ultimately.
So we don't either, because it's very interesting with Tim Walz. He's going to be, well, he could have a good chance of being the person to be the next VP of the United States. How do you feel about that? Is that somebody that you would support the more you hear about that? Really? It is very interesting. So you're watching, keeping it honest, yours truly, Anthony Parker Alexander, Midnight at the Oasis. So we come on every time, this same time, and we come on because we want to continue to give you news that I'll say you could use. I'm over here setting up for my next one. And even if you can't use it, maybe it'll make you say, that's interesting. I never thought about that. So we're going to have coming up one of my favorite people, Anderson Cooper. You know him, you love him, you can't live without him. Very rich man. Family is rich. I think his mom was Gloria Vestaban, or she had a clothing attire. So he was rich, totally rich. So a little side note, he became famous when Hurricane Katrina happened. And he was just a reporter on CNN doing a lot of war stories. Hurricane Katrina happened. He went down there, became famous. Interesting thing was, I was down there when Hurricane Katrina happened. And I was working on a job and trying to get interviews and everything. And I was in a section that was very damaged. People didn't have phones, so they had poles, and on the poles they put phones so people could use them. And so when you would drive, there were two bridges, and the one bridge, the water had overflown it. It was still there, and the other bridge was barely there. So for you to go in and out of town, you had to drive on this bridge. So I was on the bridge. Very scary at the time. And when I was there in the inner cities of there, my friend here, even though he's not my friend, Anderson Cooper, was down in the French Quarters. French Quarters were nice. You know anything about that place? Music, everything. Great. But he was interviewing people who had gone through some bad times. But meanwhile, I was in the area that was in bad times, which was crazy. So he became known. And after that ended, he went and started Anderson Cooper 360. The guy is a great reporter. He's really like out there. Any kind of dangerous things, he's out there. But the past couple of years, he hasn't been as popular. He does a New Year's Eve show. He filled in worked with Kelly Ripa and tried to do another type show. But he's one where a lot of people may not like him as much because when he was popular, Anderson Cooper was CNN. Okay. And so when the three girls in Ohio were missing, they were found after a decade. Anderson Cooper came to my city. And while he was there for a couple of days, I said, you know what? I'm going to go where Anderson's at and see if he remembers me from a Hurricane Katrina. So I went down, brought my family while he was finishing up a story on his show. And I came up to him and grabbed him and kind of pulled him towards me and said, hey, Anderson, I'm Anthony Parker. You may or may not remember me, but I remember you when you were just starting to get popular. And you're in my city, and I want to say, welcome. And we took a picture and everything, so it was kind of cool. But in his heyday, at least 5 years ago, maybe for 10 years, he was one of the best reporters and anchors on CNN. So sometimes it's good to see him, and he's got a great sense of humor. So sometimes it's good to see him doing what he does. And so Donald Trump has always talked about how Kamala is turning into Bernie Sanders. And I told you how I feel about Bernie Sanders. But who's the best person to interview to ask and talk about Kamala Harris becoming Bernie Sanders besides, of course, you know it, Bernie Sanders? I'm just keeping it simple, keeping it real, keeping it honest. Midnight at the Oasis, Anderson Cooper with the one and only Kamala Harris copycat, Bernie Sanders.
As Vice President Harris appears to have momentum in polls, the former president has tried to paint her as a liberal extremist, often comparing Harris and her running mate to former presidential candidate Senator Bernie Sanders, suggesting their policies are even further left.
As she gives off this California, San Francisco vibe, he has this sort of Bernie Sanders in hunting gear vibe.
She was trying to position herself to the left of Bernie Sanders.
She was to the left of Bernie Sanders.
She ranked and scored to the left of Bernie Sanders.
She is considered more left-wing than crazy Bernie Sanders. Look at her. She's worse than Bernie. She made Bernie Sanders look like a moderate.
Because she's an extremist, further to the left than Bernie Sanders.
So, of course, here you see Bernie Sanders. He always talks like this with his hands. But the interesting thing, the third party independent movement, people invested a lot of time into Bernie Sanders. You got to give him credit. AOC probably wouldn't be AOC unless it was Bernie Sanders, okay? People believed in his message. He was kind of like the RFK today. No respect. But young people, independents, really believed in his message because he was not going to be bought by big companies. But then you find out that he has been bought by big companies. I told Dr. West on my show, and he didn't know about this, that his family has invested in a company and they were kind of shady in his dealings. We won't talk about it here, but you can see a clip of my show as I ream Bernie Sanders. He talks about he's against big companies, big spending, but you find out that he's in bed with big companies and big spending. So now, the one, the only, Bernie Sanders.
Joining me now, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders. I don't know if they sent out a memo and everybody's just like reading off this memo, but
I guess so. I guess so.
It's like to me, this is like when Woody Allen had Marshall McLuhan in the line in Annie Hall and said, I happen to have Marshall McLuhan right here. So here's Senator Sanders. Do you take that as a badge of honor? I mean, is it a fair comparison in your view?
Look, Kamala Harris is I would say, a very strong mainstream Democrat. She has been, she has her views on this or that issue. But if anyone is worried that she is more to the left than Bernie Sanders, I think it's not quite accurate.
And you're hearing it from Bernie Sanders himself. He doesn't compare Kamala to him, but she's not literally a mainstream politician. When she has her website up, which hopefully she will sometime, you get to check out her policies.
Harris has
For better
clearly,
or for worse.
right, yeah. Harris has clearly reversed herself, though, on a number of more progressive policy positions that she held when she ran in the primary for the Democratic primary in the 2020 election. Do you think she's at risk of losing some of the core progressive base because of it?
No.
Does it raise
Look,
concerns for you?
This is the most consequential election in a lifetime. She is running against somebody who is not only a pathological liar, he is a very dangerous guy. You are familiar with the reality that just the other day he announced that the 10 or 15,000 people who came out to the vice president's rally in Michigan, they really weren't there. It was just artificial intelligence. I mean, you're in a crazy world here. And I think every progressive in America understands that we've got to do everything we can to elect Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. And it's not only his lying, he denies women the right to control their own bodies. He thinks climate change is a hoax, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the choice is incredibly clear. And I think progressives from one end of this country to the other are going to do everything we can to elect the vice president.
So, okay, he may lie too, Trump. But then how many people in the Biden administration lied about Biden? Saying that he was up for the job, had all the energy and everything. And every time he staggered or looked sick, the media totally ignored it. The politicians ignored it. Bernie, I mean, did you support Biden before he decided to drop out? And do you think Kamala is the best person for the job? And then also voting wise, since you're a guy that likes going out to the people, do you think the super delegates aren't really the people? Nothing against them, but nobody from us voted for Kamala. And maybe, we would have picked her. But this Kamala Harris, Tim White's combination, how much of it has to do with the impact coming from the American voters?
You've obviously endorsed Harris. When you and I spoke before, you had endorsed her. You'd said you wanted to make sure that she would represent and fight for all the working class issues that you have devoted your life to. Clearly, you feel she has met that bar. You've endorsed her. I'm wondering what you make of the campaign that she and Governor Walz are running.
Well, look, she has come. I mean, you got to have enormous respect for the fact that just in the last few weeks, she has put together a campaign. She's been in many parts of the country, brought out huge and enthusiastic crowd. She's raising money. The polling is good. She selected, I think, a very good vice presidential candidate. All of that speaks a whole lot to her leadership, and she deserves a lot of credit for that.
She didn't pick Josh Shapiro. Would he have been a better candidate? Let me see. She had twerking at one of her campaign rallies. I mean, what are you showing for that? Donald Trump has had singers. She has had twerking. Okay. She hasn't spoken to the media about any issues and says that I'll speak at the end of the month. And I feel like I'm over here, over talking you, Anderson. But you really feel she was the best candidate for the job, Bernie? Because you got nothing to say, nothing negative. What is the things that she needs to do to improve? Talk to me, Bernie.
The point that I have made is that I happen to believe that at a time when so many of our people in this country are struggling, when you got 60% of our people are living paycheck to paycheck, when we have massive income and wealth inequality, when we have half of our elderly people living on $30,000 or less, I think not only is it the right thing to start talking about issues that are of concern to working class people, it is really good politics. I did a poll last week. Our campaign did a poll, and what it showed is that overwhelming majority of Democrats, independents, Republicans, for example, believe that we should expand Social Security benefits by lifting the cap on taxable income, which is now, I think, at $168,000. You do that, you could raise incomes for low-income seniors in a very significant way. Overwhelming majority of the American people think we should not pay more for prescription drugs in this country than people around the world, which means lowering prescription drug costs by 50%. Can we do that? We really can do that. We can expand Medicare to cover dental, hearing, and vision. We should have a tax system which finally asks the billionaires to stop paying their fair share of taxes. Despite what Donald Trump may think, these are not radical left ideas. This is what the overwhelming majority of the American people believe is good policy, including a majority of Republicans.
So if that's how everybody feels, and Kamala has been in office as VP with Joe Biden for 3.5 years, weren't some of these the same problems that was happening 3.5 years ago? And you've had 3.5 years to try to implement them, but now that your term is ending, and I don't care who you are, Republican or Democrat, you're saying, look, vote for me and we'll do this. But you were involved in the Biden administration, and some of these same policies were not talked about. You guys are almost making it seem like on day one we're going to do this. You've been in, I don't know how many days as VP, Assistant Joe Biden. Why haven't any of these policies been at least attempted to be implemented in the past 3.5 years?
The Washington Post is reporting tonight that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has attempted to reach out to Vice President Harris to meet about a possible endorsement, just as he met with Donald Trump about a possible endorsement. Would you see any reason why Harris should do that?
I mean, they got to figure that stuff out. I have not paid a whole lot of attention to the Kennedy campaign. They will make their own decision on that.
So you got a guy running for president. You haven't kept up with what they've been doing, RFK Jr. So he's saying, hey, let's get together so we can do an endorsement. Why wouldn't you want an endorsement if you're Kamala? One of the first people. Because that almost means he's kind of giving his run up. You don't think Donald Trump, Nikki Haley, who hated him, said she'll never do anything? Why don't think we ever got an endorsement from Chris Christie, who like really hates Trump? But Nikki and all those people that were running from Trump, they potentially gave their endorsement. Kind of. Nikki's was kind of backdoorish, but she did give it. So when somebody is saying like RFK, I've been trying to reach her. Okay, Kamala, I know you've been busy, but give the guy some respect. He's also running for president too.
There are likely going to be large demonstrations by pro-Palestinian groups opposed to the war against Hamas at the Democratic Convention. The Biden administration has got a lot of pushback, obviously, from progressive voters on the issue of Gaza and U.S. support for Israel.
Yep.
Do you think that animosity, I don't know if animosity is the right word, but that concern, do you think that has crossed over to Vice President Harris? How much of an issue is this going to be for her campaign moving forward?
Well, look, Anders, let me be very honest with you. I believe that the Biden administration has been probably the most progressive administration in the United States since Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Biden said he wanted to do that, and I think he has kept his word, and Kamala Harris has been by his side. So on domestic issues, they have a whole lot to be proud of. But I think the president has been wrong in terms of his support for Netanyahu. I happen to agree with the International Criminal Court that what Netanyahu is doing in Gaza, the massive killings, the destruction of the healthcare system, the destruction of housing, the bombing of every university, and now creating a situation where tens of thousands of children face starvation. The United States, in my view, should not be providing another nickel to Netanyahu and his war machine. That's my view. President Biden disagrees with that.
I give him credit right then and there. He just said something totally different. He disagrees with how Biden is leading that particular situation. So I give Bernie Sanders credit on what he just said.
Do I think that will have an impact among young people, among some progressives? I do. But at the end of the day, I think most progressives will say he is wrong. The president is wrong on Gaza, but the alternative is Donald Trump, and that is not an acceptable alternative. So we've got to keep pushing the administration to change its views regarding funding for the Israeli war machine, but we have got to defeat Donald Trump and elect Kamala Harris.
Senator Sanders, I appreciate your time.
So there you have it. Bernie Sanders. Trump was talking about Bernie, and boom, booyah, Bernie Sanders was there. So what do you think about that? Keeping it simple, keeping it real, keeping it honest. Midnight at the Oasis. You have any questions or comments, you can email yours truly, parkerman2011 at gmail.com, parkerman2011 at gmail.com. You can leave a voice message, 216-702-3718, 216-702-3718. I'm going to read you a couple of comments from people that have left me comments on some of my videos and shows. And we talked about Kamala. If you noticed, there's a change in her. She's harder now, and there is less giggling. How many people were irritated by her giggling? Some people called her the Joker. Some people called her the Joker's assistant. Some people said she had a disease that she's laughing so much. Some people said she has laughing gas. But most people, and some people said she's happy. Okay. So I got this from Chris, and it talks about giggling Kamala. Give the U.S. voters much better choices for the general presidential election candidates to choose from. Both males and females, whites and blacks, and all races in between. But don't give us a very poorly voted on choice from 2020 and never voted on vice president from 2024. So that was interesting. And let me give you another one here. Speaking of RFK, I've got some clips up about RFK and the Democrats. I mean, he's never respected. Okay, so disrespected and couldn't get on certain ballots. He decided, hey, I'm going to get off that ballot and run independent. And to this day, and even having, Republicans, well, really Democrats, having security. He wasn't granted security most of the time that he was running for president. So somebody could have attacked him any time just for being a Kennedy. Thank God he never was attacked it. But after Trump had the assassination attempt, then they started looking after RFK, but they should have before. So this is in response to RFK versus Democrats. Robert, give it up and go hiking and quit wasting time and money in people's votes. After the stupid bear incident, you couldn't win if you were running by yourself. Wow. And some people say he's controversial with whatever he does. But what do you think of those? We're not going to talk about the bear incident. Okay. We don't have time today. So as we close, 7 states, these are supposedly the deciding states for who's going to become president of the United States, Trump or Miss Harris. So let me break it down to you real quick, little cliff notes. You can check it out. The 7 states. And this with the third party candidates are also included in this mix. So let's not forget you guys. So you guys are running, really. And I can tell you too, for running for Congress, anybody that decides to run for office, you got to give them credit because some are just egotistical, millionaires that run. Some just love the political game of the power, and some just want to make a difference. And that part is yours too. I love that you can make a difference. You get a lot of power, but you can make a difference too. And so anybody that runs, I don't care whether they're crazy or not. It's up to you if you're going to vote for them. But it's an honorable position and honor to be in office. And we see a lot of people, they misuse that power, go into their head. They don't talk to people and they get caught with, criminal activities while they're in office, some of them. But it's an honorable job, and anybody that pursues it, if I had a hat, I'd tip it to you for running. So the 7 states now, listen up. Biden, I'm not Biden, he's not running anymore. Harris and Trump. So Arizona, Harris leads Trump 46% to 42%. 46% to 42%. She leads him by 4. In May, Trump was beating Biden by 5 percentage points. So she has gained 9 points and she dropped in. Trump was originally winning Arizona. Now Harris is winning. Georgia, Fannie Willis, all those. Republican state, I know Atlanta is predominantly Democratic, but listen to this now. Harris and Trump are tied at 46% in the poll. In May, Trump led Biden by 4 percentage points in Georgia. So Trump was beating Biden by 4%. And now Harris has caught up to that 4% and is tied. And as controversial as Atlanta has been, they've been trying to go after Trump. Literally, Fannie Willis. If Trump wins, who knows what's going to happen to those people, including Fannie Willis. But they're tied in Georgia. In Michigan, Harris leads Trump 46% to 44% by 2 points. In May, Trump was leading 3 points in Michigan. So Trump was winning by 3 points. Harris came in. Now she leads 2 points. So she gained 5 points since she's been in. Nevada, Trump leads Harris. Now he leads in this one, 47% to 42% in Nevada. In May, Trump led Biden by 8 percentage points in Nevada. So since she's come in, even though she's behind 5 percentage points where Biden was behind 8. So she's moved up there. So you can't say she hasn't been moving up. North Carolina, Harris leads Trump 46% to 44%, 2 points. In May, Trump led Biden by 8 points. By 8 points. So now, Harris got in, and she's only behind 2 points. So she gained 6 points by entering. Pennsylvania, Harris leads Trump 48%, and she's beating here, to 43% in Pennsylvania. So in May, Trump led Biden by 3%. Wow. So he was beating Biden by 3%. Now she's beating Trump by 5%. So she's gained 8%. And last but not least, Wisconsin. Harris leads Trump in Wisconsin, 48% to 43%, 5%. In May, Trump and Biden were tied. So they were tied at 43%, excuse me, period. And then she enters the race, and she beats him by 5%. Wow. Where she leads him. So do you believe in polls? I don't know. Trump says he doesn't. Biden says he doesn't. Well, Trump does. Does Harris believe? Would anybody else have taken Biden's place? Josh Shapiro? Would he, if he was the nominee, be beating Trump? So if you remember about a month ago, people had thought about even getting Harris off the VP ticket because they were scared. You don't want Biden to get sick because Harris is even worse as president. They were ready to throw her off the ticket and get somebody else. And we kept saying, and I said too, wow, is Biden going to leave? And that was a talk. And as soon as he had that debate, it was a groundswell. And then it was a moment of time that everybody was saying he's going to be gone by a weekend. A couple weeks later, and then he decides, bombshell, I'm going to leave. And then people had to decide, do we put Harris up there? If we don't put her there and get somebody else, then we're going to lose that money. So how much of it was money? How much of it was a lot of the candidates were saying, you know what, we have to get Biden off here because we're up here Democratic. He's up here, we're here. He's going down. We don't want to go down either. So we have to get rid of him and maybe get somebody else, new blood that pulls us up. And we have a better chance of winning. Because people had suspended their fundraising for Biden. They didn't believe that he was the right one. And the people kept saying, you know, if we get rid of Biden, it's going to mess up this ticket, this Democratic convention. We don't know what to do. We don't think we're going to rally around Harris. And then look at what they did. The world did not end. Okay? It was another day. She's been gaining more money. She's changed her style, whether you believe it or not. She hasn't talked to the public as far as interviews. She's got Tim Walz, who looks like a bulldog, okay, and will back her. We're okay. And if Trump, like they say, is the worst thing to ever happen, let's go back 4 years, let's go back 3.5, and let's think about that. 3.5 years ago, was he the worst thing? Some people's eyes, he was. Do we think that the Harris ticket will be even better? Some people think it will. But again, it's up to you to vote. If you don't vote, don't say anything. You have no right to say anything. So get out there and vote and make a difference. Democrat, Republican, and let's not forget the third party and all the other candidates, but we have kind of like forgot them. They're still out there. I'm going to be interviewing somebody that's running still for president. And why do you run for president if you feel you don't have a chance? I love this political field that's going on now. It's crazy. I know you guys do. I thank you for supporting our show. This is Midnight at the Oasis. This is under the umbrella of Keeping It Honest with yours truly, Anthony Parker. If you have any questions, comments, you can email yours truly, parkerman2011 at gmail.com. parkerman2011 at gmail.com. You can text me, voicemail, 216-702-3718, 216-702-3718. And we're going to read this last one. And this is if Kamala becomes president. And this is by, says user, so generic. Can anyone imagine Kamala at a world forum with a word salad and finishing it out with cackling and everyone baffled and confused? So just think when she would have to make a difficult decision. But I will tell what, it will be okay. Because Obama's the puppeteer. That's why he dominated her, so that he could do what no other president has done before. 4 terms of office, too visible, too invisible. I like that one. How many people think that Obama's in this somewhere? People thought that Obama was the one with Biden. And some of the same people from Obama's people that helped him out are involved with Kamala. Some people are calling her the female equivalent of Obama. Yes, we can. Don't know if we can. Maybe we can, or we will. There's my slogans. So, Democrat, Republican, Independent, whoever, whatever you are, just get out there and vote. So, we thank you. Go to our Patreon page. Be a part of our team even more, our family. As I grow, you grow. Hit the like, the share, the subscribe button. And please subscribe. I love all the comments that you guys give me. Keep them coming. I really do. So you're going to see us again tomorrow at the same time. We close out the day. We open up the morning. We say a prayer. And hopefully you like what we do. So I'm Anthony Parker Alexander. Not just keeping it simple, not just keeping it real, keeping it honest. Check out my shows. Have a good evening. Have a good morning, wherever you're at. And even if this is in replay, bam, subscribe too. So we will talk again I'm Anthony Parker Alexander, and you've been watching Midnight at the Oasis. God bless.